Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is September 26, 2022, and I wanted to make a video to discuss a very important topic. It's something actually we spent most of last week in some way discussing or connected to. So, as many of you know, there's a huge amount of work right now going on behind the scenes about building the scaffolding for a members-based organization that basically serves as kind of the hub and spoke that aggregates the community. It kind of determines the will of the community. It comes up with strategies to help them get there, and then it encourages people to execute them. So the cool part about that is it's a way for everybody to share their voice. Now, voice works in many different ways. There's Twitter, and there's Reddit, and there's Telegram. There's also software. And if we're going to get to a healthy ecosystem, we need to get to a point where we have a polyglot ecosystem, which effectively means that there are multiple clients running concurrently with completely different dev teams, different philosophies, different languages, and frankly, different USPs. So there's this issue of, well, what is the canonical client of Cardano? And it's a very similar question to what is the canonical client of wallet of Cardano? And the answer should be none. Instead, what the answer should be that we agree on standards, and those standards have a robust testing framework, and then we have two types of clients and wallets, certified and uncertified. So what I decided to do is make a video, and it's actually on the back of a poll that Rick McCracken, good old Rick, created for us. And he asked a hypothetical poll. He said, if DC Spark put out a Project Catalyst proposal for 8 million USD to build another Cardano node implementation of Rust and open source, how would you vote? And a lot of people said, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll upvote it. It's a fair question. And so this is something actually we've been thinking about for a long time. And we started here. So this is a legacy project from the European Union. It's called Privilege. And we actually received money to work alongside Guard Time, IBM Research, University of Tartu, TV, University of Salerno, University of Edinburgh, and here's us, input output. And our contribution to that was this idea right here, updatable blockchains from Nikos and Michele and Agalos and Dionysus. And we had a long conversation basically about how does one create an ecosystem where you get security and good specification and great testing, but at the same time, you have multiple clients. So behind the scenes, we've been working with a language called Agda. Basically, it's super Haskell. And we've created a lot of infrastructure, and we're starting to move in that direction where we're going to go from hypothetical infrastructure to applied infrastructure. So here's kind of a whiteboard video. Hold on to your butts. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Okay. So basically, what we want to do is with the MBO, the members-based organization, it'll have this idea of, sorry, my pad is acting a little weird. It'll have this idea of CTFs or Cardano Technical Fellows. Something like that. And basically, these are people that kind of work on the core, and they come from the community. So they're members of community plus staff. So they're not beholden to a particular company, but rather they're either on loan to the members-based organization or they actually work for it. But in any event, basically what we can do is we can have this Agda core, and that would be a reference. Now, it's not production. Okay, so that's not its point. Does not equal production. So production is what you guys have right now with Daedalus, and it has all kinds of extra code and all kinds of extra stuff. And basically, the point of that production is to ensure that your client is very fast. So, things like fast, secure, some compatibility stuff. There's going to be stuff off spec. So proprietary things that are built into for that particular ecosystem. and so forth. Like, for example, if DC Spark did their own client, I'd imagine they would probably build some special infrastructure to connect it to Flint Wallet and make that an easy process, whereas a reference wouldn't do that. And it'd be the same for us. For a node, if we commercialized it, we'd probably connect it to Lace because you want a good user experience. It's not really what a specification is about. So the idea is that your CTFs would maintain a core, and they'd be able to very quickly link the SIP process to a formal core. And then what happens is, as the end of the SIP funnel, as you go through all the stages of the SIP, so SIPs are again Cardano improvement proposals. Okay, so at the end of the funnel, you get to a point where you say, hey, let's spec it. And because this would be a formal spec with an active core, what you can actually do is something called code extraction. So what it does is that the specification gives you code that can serve as a reference for testing. So we're still kind of putting these pieces together, and then we'll do a big formal presentation. But the basic idea is that you have your Agda core, then you have your reference extracted code, and then you'll have a little bit of other stuff. So you'll have your reference update system. Okay. And then you'll have your wallet certs. And then you'll finally have your core cryptography, because people probably shouldn't be rolling their own crypto. We should consolidate on that and get those things done. And this right here would serve as the reference framework for core Cardano. Now, you'd need in parallel something for utilities, infrastructure, and integrations. That's a different topic. That's stuff like Rosetta and DB Sync and so forth. But for now, when we talk about competing clients, this is the way to go. Then you could take the Haskell client and start and say, hey, it's no longer canonical. Haskell client is just the Haskell client. Then you could have a Rust client. You could have a TypeScript client, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's just this question of, are they certified or not? So you could have, some be certified, and then you can have others not be. So the basic idea is that the active core would have a small team, maybe 5 to 10. And as I said, a combination of CTFs who are basically working straight for the MBO, and then contributed developers like people from IO, people from DC Spark. And they basically maintain a reference update system. They maintain a reference set of extracted code. They would prove properties about it. And they'd also maintain a wallet certification plus the core cryptography of the system. And then if anybody wants to build a client, you, the community, you have to have that question of, well, how do I know my client is safe? How do I know my client is compliant with the protocol? I.e., it's interoperable. How do I know that the hard fork combinator is going to work for that client, so that when an update is triggered, that all the clients update and so forth? There's a lot of questions that a community member would have. And effectively what a certification process does is it gives you the agility of competition, but then it gives you the safety of standards. And what's really nice is that this Agda core, because it's not production, this is where all the dev time really is. You can do stuff weeks here, maybe months, and over here you do stuff years. Because at the end of the rainbow, we have to test it on many different platforms. You have to ensure compatibility. Here, this is all about saying that we have a ubiquitous standard. And we want to make sure that everybody is following that. So this is where I'd like to move. And then IO, we'd be happy to continue if we can get the economics right, the Haskell client. Then we can add a lot more to it, make it less canonical and more of a commercial client. And then I'd like to see tough competition. I'd love to see DC Spark actually be the custodian of a full node Rust client. And I'd actually like to see at least one imperative client, like a TypeScript client or a Dart client or something like that, to bring web technologies. Alternatively, it'd be really cool to do Python, because I think that has a lot of pedagogical value, having a Python client in our ecosystem. You see, and then we just basically all contribute a few CTFs to the core. And then this gives some teeth to the SIP process, because the last step of the SIP process would be to specify things inside the core. We already have extremely efficient code extraction. In fact, James Chapman and others in our ecosystem are extremely good at this, and they've written many papers about it. And ACT has grown up a lot as kind of a good framework for this type of stuff. And then we can talk a lot about what safety standards should exist. And then if you're a wallet developer, so they say, well, what is an official wallet? What should be listed on Cardano.org as a recommended wallet, or any of the other media channels, which were quite large? Basically, you can just create a self-serve test that says anyone who is certified gets to be listed on Cardano.org. Just that simple. Now, how long would this take to get up? Well, we're working real hard to get that MBO stood up, and then try to get as much membership as possible and have the community serve on all the boards. And then there'll be cool voting things and everything. And there's a ton of governance stuff that's underway. So Voltaire's under heavy, heavy development. In parallel, we've been beefing up our formal methods group and really setting these things going. And there's a lot of excitement at IO right now about this idea. And my hope is that I can spin out a team as quickly as possible to start talking about what an Agda core would look like under a new Git repo that's controlled by the members-based organization. And there's a lot of people that have wanted to do this for a long time, and they've worked towards it. We still have an interesting question about utilities, infrastructure, and integrations. So the future of DB-Sync, GraphQL, the future of Rosetta, Blockchain Explorer, Smash, a lot of this stuff. And there's a lot of really cool community stuff too, like TXPipe and Scrolls and this type of stuff. And I think that they deserve a fair consideration. So it would be nice if we had a notion of two types of technical fellows. So you have some that work on utilities, infrastructure, and integration, and some that work on core, and then had some idea of a projects and programs group that would commit resources to a lot of this community stuff. And then Catalyst can also fund that pool. And there all can also be in-kind contributions from companies in the Cardano ecosystem where they contribute CTFs to work on it. We certainly will. But it gives a nice place for a lot of the canonical infrastructure, or standard utilities infrastructure that's basically operating under an open core model. So people would take it like they would Firefly and commercialize it their own way. But I hope that helps everybody. Just to summarize, I hope it wasn't too complex. But the basic idea is that you kind of want a blueprint. And then that blueprint gives you some acceptance criteria. And then you'd have multiple opinions. And those opinions are the clients. Now, who should build the blueprint? Well, that should be built and made canonical by the community. So basically, you set up the Agda core, and then what you would do is you'd hold a vote from ADA holders. And they would say, okay, this is the canonical Cardano. And then that's the source of truth. So even if the Haskell client, for example, is out of spec, we'd have to then change the code to make it in spec with that. And what's really cool is there's just been so much advancement in formal methods that this is now becoming actually a pretty lightweight process. Now, there's a caveat. If you want to do full formal methods like proof by simulation between the reference and the production, that's a super heavy process, takes years to do. But just writing a specification is not too hard. And actually, there's a lovely video from the TLA Plus community done by Leslie Lamport. And Leslie, what he did is he's a Turing Award, so like Sylvia Macaulay, he kind of invented distributed systems. And Leslie invented a formal language called TLA Plus for spec work. And it doesn't do code extraction. It's a lighter language, but a lot of the engineers at Microsoft, there's even a book called Practical TLA. They use this in production for the Xbox team, and they discovered memory problems, and they use it for Azure, and they use it across the infrastructure, and it really helps clean up their code and creates a source of truth amongst many thousands and thousands of engineers. And most large companies, they have some form of spec language to do all these types of things. Another thing is that this spec language could also be extended for smart contract standards as well. So in summary, I hope that helps everybody kind of reason through it. I think it's never really been more of an exciting time for Cardano. Huh. So, I guess the computer froze there for a second. Anyway, it's never been a more exciting time for Cardano, and I'm pretty happy with the way things are moving. We're getting really close to a completely different way of doing things, and it's kind of the basis of years of research. It started with grants from the European Union, and scientists playing around for years on this stuff. A lot of formal methods work, and people have just gotten used to fast, seamless upgrades. They've gotten used to a lot of magic that Cardano has. To get that to continue to work as you guys are used to it, but have a polyglot ecosystem, you need some form of source of truth and then a standard for certification, because the people paying for the services, it can't be subjective. It has to be objective. So the only way to do it, in my view, is to have a members-based organization, a technical fellows program, and have a group of core spec maintainers who basically take the SIPs and they turn them into the specs. And that becomes kind of the foundation for people to certify against. And then a particular implementation details, like do we use proto buffs or this thing or that thing, that really doesn't matter much. What really matters is that you adhere to certain guidelines about safety, security, performance, as well as a canonical test suite. And that test suite, just like the Ethereum Foundation maintains for the EVM, is kind of a source for truth for the different clients that one produces. But we have to go above and beyond that. We need a standard for a decentralized update system. So the hard fork combinator needs to be abstracted and ported so it can be plugged into multiple code bases. And we need some adherence to that so that we have seamless upgrades all the way through. So at this juncture, I think the best use of money, if you guys are going to go fork over 8 million to DC Spark, is to have them work on infrastructure, utilities, and integrations. We badly need that. We need better development tools. We need things like what they've done with Flint and their version of DB Sync to get scaled up. And they definitely should be funded for that. For canonical clients, I think the first step is to get the Agda client done. And we'll have a big proposal for that. We'll talk about it first in November. And then as we roll out together the MBO next year, we'll have a proposal for how to get that team where it needs to go. And we'll certainly contribute our fair share of resources, as will others who are very excited to. And I think very quickly we can get to a foundational specification for a lot of the great work that's been done. Then it makes a lot of sense for a consortium to form, and for that consortium to talk about over the next 5 years, how do we go and do some great innovations and have a lot of competition with those innovations. So there are many dev teams. So if you are one of the people who'd like to build specs and standards, do keep it in mind that there's going to be a great opportunity to do that. If you're one of the people in mind that wants to build competing client, you think your company's great, then do reach out to us as well. because it would be nice to bring a consortium together for all of this stuff. Anyway, I hope that helps everybody think about it. You always want to carefully reason about these types of things. And thank you, Rick, for putting up the poll. It started a conversation that I think is very necessary about how we continue to decentralize. So part of that is through governance. Part of that is more on-chain governance and more voting. Part of that is making sure we continue growing the level of decentralization of the stake pool operators. And so a lot of work has to be done to facilitate that. Part of that is easier voting tools, but then a part of that is also more decentralization amongst the development teams. The problem is, you get more decentralization, you end up in a situation where if you don't handle it correctly, you can't upgrade easily because the coordination problem becomes too hard. So you need a source of truth and a standard for everybody to follow, and then some form of social structure, so a certification program that compels people to follow. And if you have all that infrastructure, I'm actually quite optimistic that we'd be able to maintain our velocity of innovation, but at the same time now all of a sudden have more than 3 or 4 competing clients beating each other up. And we built a lot of that framework for it. So thank you all for listening. I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.